Welcome back to Sister.
The camera's rolling. Oh my god. Assalamu alaikum, guys. So I'm Aisha.
And I'm Amina.
Podcast created for sisters with sisters in mind.
Assalamu alaikum. We are joined today by our brother Ahmed Raidan, and he is the founder of Muslim Fathers Support Forum, and he is an advocate for men's rights in seeing their children, and he's going to probably tell us a lot more about that in today's podcast.
Assalamu alaikum, Ahmed.
Walaikum salam, sisters. Thank you for sharing your platform with me. Inshallah, we can spread some good knowledge and help people out there.
Yes, indeed. So, Ahmed, the work that you do is massive. There's so many layers to it. There's so much that you could talk about, and there's so many cases that you've come into contact with. I'd like you to kind of start maybe with telling us why you started this group and how the group has evolved from when you first started to now.
Mm-hmm. So basically, we are a peer support group in that the group is made up of men that have been through the system of family court or currently going through it and what have you. And we give each other support basically to get through a really tough process. So I've been through the system myself. And then around 2017, 2018, I just used to go into Facebook and there's other kind of, they're called Mackenzie groups, which basically help people get through the court system without sort of a lawyer, so what you call a self-litigant. So people ask questions and stuff. So I started to develop my knowledge, and I just started to help anybody out. It didn't matter what race, color, what they believed in. It was just a general thing. But I started to notice over time that there were more and more Muslim men coming. And these are Muslim men from like India, Pakistan, Bangladesh, from the Arab communities, all types. And obviously, a chunk of the brothers don't speak English that well, and they were kind of getting a bit pounced upon by the community, the English community, as it were. So I started to realize that these brothers need help, and what brothers face in family court is the same as the non-Muslim brothers, but we also get the added extra of basic demonizing because of our faith, the way we look, and sadly, to say you got practicing sisters, they actually use this against fathers in court. It's absolutely shocking. So anyway, I spotted this trend, and I started to notice more and more men. So from that, I started to help a few brothers, and from that, the Muslim Father Support Forum was born. We put all our knowledge that we've acquired through the system together to help the next set of brothers, to help the next set of brothers, and so on. Inshallah, what we put in place here, hopefully, our aim is to become redundant. That's the aim of the group, so that we don't have this affliction in our community, that I can go off and go do other things with my life, and other brothers can go do things with their life. But hopefully, we believe in prevention is better than cure. So hopefully, if we can, spread the word about this happening in our community, and hopefully, the sisters that consider going down this path, try and divert them down a different avenue of trying to find resolution in their conflict. From starting from about 4 people, it's grown to like 500 people on our Facebook page. We've got like a WhatsApp group which got like 200 plus people, and we don't even advertise really. It's just word of mouth, a bit of this, that, and it's just grown. And every year our numbers go up, and that's really sad to see. We want our numbers to go downwards, but it's just not happening, unfortunately.
In some ways, it sounds a little bit like a growing situation. I mean, is that what you are finding?
Yeah. So on average, right now, this is speculation, but from what we've seen, because we do have a lot of people part of our team that are in courts and stuff. You'd say on average every year there must be about 1,000 Muslim families in family court, and that's me doing it on the lower side. So that's 1,000 Muslim families having this level of conflict, and they've gone to the particular court to get resolution, which is disappointing. So we've got to figure out what's going on, what's motivating people to go down this particular path. I have my own feelings on that, but again, it's just opinion, not facts. But we need to try and work out how we as a community, both genders, can work out. Divorce, unfortunately, is on the rise in every community.
Yeah.
It's, you know, but alongside of divorce this is creeping up with it. Now we've got to try and find a better way of separating better. You know, even Islamically, you know, I was just reading something, and the Prophet said that even when you do part with a gift, that's the sentiment of Islam. But we're so far from that. So how do we get back to that? You know, is one of the questions, I think, you know, for somebody else to take up, see what they can do with it.
I wanted to kind of, because there'll be, I mean, a lot of our viewers, you know, are women, right? Because it's a sister platform, and we've done a disclaimer in the opening to kind of say that we are not talking here about, you know, men that abuse women, or anything in relation to those specific cases. We are talking about this specific subject, which is when a mother, for a reason unknown, stops the father seeing the children. So we want to kind of talk about the impact that this has on, first of all, the children, and second of all, the man, because I don't think that the impact, because you've spoken quite a bit about statistics and about the court process, and it's good, and we need to hear about this. But what about the psychological effects? What about the impact that this is actually having on the family as a whole?
That's a very good question. So the way I put it, would like to describe it, is this: the relationship between a parent and a child is one of the most sacred, strongest bonds you can ever get. You know, here you got two people that have a child, and both sets of parents, you know, are willing to die for that child, whatever it takes. That's what you've got. Now, what you're doing by putting the child in the center of the conflict, you're breaking that bond essentially. And, you know, and I know some people will say, oh yeah, but, you know, later on you go through court, this, that, the other, you get contact back, or this, that, the other. Well, you know, there's some brothers that haven't seen their kids for 5 years. There's some kids, some brothers that have just had to call it quits and get on with their life and make dua that their kids will come back to them at some point. And it's like if you get a glass vase and you were to smash it and you were to try and put that back together again, you might get the shape of it and stuff, but there's always cracks and holes, and you pour the water, it's going to come out. It's just not the same. And that's what's happening here. And, you know, we've got to be very clear that, you know, Allah doesn't, you know, in the Quran it says, do not break ties, any family ties. And that act, you know, I've been told by scholars, you can get this verified, but that just below kufr is this act. You know, and that's how serious Allah sees it.
I mean, it's a major sin, you know,
absolutely.
To ties of kinship.
So even if it's for 6 months, a year, this is the level of what we're putting out there. And heaven forbid that then the parties never reconcile, the children and the parent never reconcile. If that were to happen, then, you know, it's, in the afterlife, you know, it's a severe sin that needs to be sort of held accountable for. So now you've got these children, especially, you know, I'll say more about the father's side of things. There are sisters that this happens to, by the way. You know, it's not exclusively to the fathers. There are some sisters it happens to. As a group, we always say we believe in both parents being involved in the child's life. We never out to sort of like oust a parent from there. It's totally, you know, un-Islamic. From the father's perspective, especially with daughters, that bond is so special. You know, and when girls grow up without a father, they have issues. You know, there's various stats and stuff I won't hit you with, but there are various stats out there that show that when children grow up without a parent in their life, it has a real knock-on effect. And this is what we're doing.
So Ahmed, sorry to cut you again, but we would like to hear some of the stats, like maybe not the, you know, like a long-winded version, but what are the statistics? Because I know in the US there's actually a term, or, you know, called daddyless daughters syndrome, which is termed in the US, meaning that the implications, the effects that not having a present father has on a daughter, there's various different psychological effects attached to that. So I feel like it is important for people watching, or maybe, you know, women that are in this situation that for one reason or another got caught up, because, you know, we are human. And sometimes these things can happen as a result of, you know, a relationship, but we have to look at it from the point of view of what is this doing to the children? What is this doing to the dads of the children?
Yeah. So obviously, I think that in England we call them daddy issue girls kind of thing.
Yeah.
So, you know, generally, girls that do go through this sort of stuff, they tend to have a lot of anxiety issues. And there's some statistics being knocked about. I can't remember if it was Office of National Statistics or where, but they're saying that, you know, there's a high percentage of single parent homes where, you know, the children tend to go off the rails, they become drug addicts, they don't achieve as well in school, and they suffer from depression. So, you know, they're the kind of the general stats that are out there, but they tend to be a lot higher in single parent homes. Now, you know, obviously I won't say like single mother homes, but generally it tends to be that way. And that's just one of the facts that are there. And, you know, and this is it. And I think, you know, whatever your motivations are, and the kind of motivations we see, again, this is just opinion, but from the hundreds of cases we see, we always look at like what's the fuel behind this. It tends to be financial, tends to be control, tends to be revenge, and one of the other ones is to save face. So you know, I come from the Asian culture, so in our communities we very much want to lay blame. Your relationship didn't work out. Whose fault was it? Was it his fault? Was it her fault? This, that, the other. And sometimes this kind of motivates people to make these kinds of, it's kind of like allegations, if it we'll call it that. You make these allegations, then people double down on them. Because once, this is like Shaitan's whisper, once they put you down a particular bad path, it's very hard to come off that bad path. And, you know, very seldom do you hear people put their hands up and say, you know what, I did wrong. I let my emotions get to me. And it happens. It happens in relationships between men and women. You know, like look, even when between men and women in relationships, situations happen. People get emotionally charged, and the wrong things happen. There are those that put their hands up to it. There's others that just double down and say, "No, it's not my fault." And this is it's very similar to that. You know, but these are the motivations, and what the knock-on effect is. End of the day, the only loser out of this mainly are the children, and that's the real issue, because really, as a child, you want everybody on your team, as many people on your team, you know, want to get you success, get you over the hill, get you to that level of adulthood where you can be the best version of yourself. Now, if you're chopping away a major figure like a father or like a parent, even if a mother, straight away this child is at a disadvantage. So whatever your feelings are, put those aside, put the child first and say, right, how do we work this out? And how do we get the right result? You know, I know it's a complex situation, it's turbulent, it's emotional, but we need to put these things aside and try and figure out what's best for the kids. Put them first, and then figure out the rest behind it.
You know, I think you mentioned this blame culture, and I think what comes with that is the shame that's attached, which, you know, that all of these things are what make people react and do these things in the heat of a moment and not make the right choices. And like you said, the impact on the children is the most important thing that we have to really consider, which nobody doesn't consider until later on. And that's when they start seeing, you know, the behaviors changing. Because what we're talking about, you know, daddyless daughters, you know, or sisters or women with daddy issues, it's different for the men in terms of how it shows up for them in their behavior, but it's the same thing. It impacts them as well. And I think it's important for us to really sort of hone down on what that looks like, because that's what we have to essentially avoid. It's the reason why we've got so many problems now in the Ummah with marriage, because the examples that were given were not healthy ones. And then those who did grow up without a father figure, we'll just say father figure for now, because I think it's one of the most important things to really kind of focus on, what the role that the father plays in the home for the child. You know, each parent is key in that child's development. While there are mothers that are not in the parent's life, in the child's life, the majority is fathers missing from the child's life. So this is a key problem that we have in society in general. But in the ummah right now, it's something that we shouldn't even be facing this. Why? What is happening? You know, it's a question to be asking. And it's sisters who are kind of perpetuating this situation. We need to look at that.
Absolutely, sister. You absolutely nailed it there. You know, we as an ummah should not be having this. You know, even now when I do talk about it to brothers, they're like, "What, in the Muslim community, this is happening?" But you, even to non-Muslims, like you guys are like, you've got it all sorted out. Your rules and regulations to tackle all of this stuff. We've read it in your books. You know, but how come you guys are having this issue? And you know, and this is it. You know, this is what I think we as an ummah need to start realizing. You know, and one of the questions you posed earlier, sister, was about the effect on men. You know, in all honesty, that the men that go through it, I have brothers, you know, weekly calling me up and they're in tears. And you know, suicide in Islam is haram, as we know, but you've got men contemplating it, really contemplating it. And you know, sadly to say, there's a couple of times I've actually spoken to brothers, talking them down from that sort of mindset, saying, look, you know, don't worry, we're in it together, you know, we'll get there. And you know, if you look at, again, going down the stats, but you know, it was International Men's Day recently, I think on the weekend. Some I think Mankind put some stats out there. So the stats they put down was like 70% of suicides in our society is men. 85% of the homeless in society are men. You know, 70% of homicides, so murders and stuff, are men. And this was an interesting one. 40% of domestic abuse victims are men. You know, so you know what the narrative out there, the truth is something else. You know, and unfortunately, I think this is what sisters got to realize as well, and I think everybody has to realize, not just sisters. You know, I'll say everybody. When you enter the court system is geared towards making people fight. And there's people, there's little satellites that hang off the court system, like certain aid groups and stuff like that. They're there to basically, every time there's conflict, they make money off us. They make money off the men through the solicitors. They make money off the women through getting them through their doors to sign up to certain things, this, that, the other. You know, we're cash cows right now. And we need to come out of this system, because all we're doing is we're feeding the fitna, essentially. And, you know, this is why we as an ummah need to wake up to this. And I appreciate, listen, we as an ummah don't have enough facilities to do better conflict resolution. In all honesty, I've seen a lot of mediation services, Muslim-based mediation services. I'm just saying the ones I have seen. I don't think they're fit for purpose. I don't think they really get to the hearts of the issue. I don't think they really bring around reconciliation. You know, and I think we just need to do it better. Just because somebody's well versed in Quran and Hadith and this, that, the other, doesn't make them a therapist, a mediator, and so on. And I think we as an ummah need to come together, maybe get people trained up properly, and create proper avenues for people to go down to get reconciliation. And if they are parting, to do better ways of parting. So, you know, one of the things definitely out there.
There's a few things that really upset me about having this conversation. The first one is the fact that I was really very much unaware of not the severity. I was pretty much unaware of the magnitude of this issue. So this has only come to really mine and possibly Amina's attention within the last year or so, where it was almost like, for myself, it's just unbelievable that this is something that's happening in the Muslim community. This isn't something that I was aware of myself. Normally what we hear is the other way round, right? We hear about brothers not being safe, or maybe abused, or maybe divorced, and things like that, that kind of allude to the fact that the brothers are doing something wrong and the sisters are the victims. Now, I'm not in any way saying that that is not the case, but we really have to hone in on the fact that there are brothers that are victims of being estranged from their children due to, you know, the mother out of her choice. And the courts, unfortunately, you know, I was doing some research on this subject, the courts always, unfortunately, favor the mother unless it's, you know, exceptional circumstances. And then, you know, there's the fact that domestic abuse against men is almost like, it's almost like a joke. And like you said about suicide, I'm a counsellor myself, and I've supported men not only that have been estranged from their children, but also that are extremely suicidal, and they've never actually spoken about feeling like this. So we don't even recognize and realize generally the impact that these kind of things are having on men, because men do not talk about these issues. So I just want to commend you and say that it's very brave of you to not only speak about this issue, but also to set up an organization to allow other men to not feel, you know, afraid and not feel ashamed to actually step forward and talk about these issues. Because, you know, for a grown man to cry, let's be honest, this is not something that is looked at as some, you know, it's looked at as what you're crying for, when actually, you know, they need that space to be able to cry. They need that space to be able to, you know, be very honest and open. Whether suicide is haram and, you know, it's a sin in Islam or not, people can still feel suicidal. And if you are estranged from your children, you know, this can bring about suicidal ideation. Of course it can, you know.
And it's going to have a knock-on effect when you're talking about homelessness. You know, so going into depression means that you're somebody who doesn't pay attention to paying the bills. You don't necessarily show up for work. You do all these things where you're staying in bed for hours on end, and you don't do life because you can't focus. You can't focus because of the emotional wound that you're carrying. And I want to pick up on what you were saying at the beginning, Aisha, because I think there's two things here. You know, there's a real cognitive dissonance, and then there's unconscious bias, because when we hear stories, I'm going to talk from the perspective of women, and this is purely for the sake that we know there's going to be women who are going to listen to this and they're going to say, yeah, but what about? Okay, what we have to do is we have to remember that everything is an individual situation. We can't always be comparing one situation to another. This is happening here and this is happening there. But because what I think is a real issue is the unconscious bias, which will cause the cognitive dissonance. So as women, as men, we have an unconscious bias towards each other. As women, we have this unconscious bias towards men, and as men, there's an unconscious bias towards women. And it's not our fault. It's because of the messages that we've been, you know, fed. We live in the West. There's a lot of different messages that we're fed, and then what you grow up with also impacts that. You know, a lot of women will have this, you know, unconscious bias that it must have been something that the man done. Whereas similarly, the same with the men, there must have been something that the woman's done, you know. And because of that, then we have this cognitive dissonance where we don't want to accept that, no, this is what's happening. There's somebody's lied, the woman has lied and caused the man to not be able to see his children now. And now we're in a situation where they're going to court and the children are going to be the ones who are impacted the most. Because they're going to grow up into adults who then take on, you know, the fact that their father wasn't in their life because maybe their mum's telling them something which isn't the truth, and blame themselves. And that blame turns into a set of behaviors that they actually don't even understand where it comes from until they then maybe go to therapy or counseling.
And then that's exactly, and then it's like a cycle, like you just said, then they end up in the therapy session talking about, you know, the mother wound or the father wound or whatever it is that's showing up, because they haven't had the correct developmental attributes that they need from having the relationship with mother and father.
Sometimes in relationships they are toxic, you know. We've got to say that, but does that mean that toxicity is going to go on to the children? Because two people, like some people, just aren't compatible. You know, and look, I want to try and explain it from a man's perspective here, right? Especially a Muslim man's perspective. And this is something that I feel isn't spoken about, and we need to sort of recognize it. Muslim men generally don't date, right? It may happen in the background and stuff like that, but generally we don't date. The first time we'll ever live with a woman is when we're married, right? Whereas, like, if you are non-Muslim counterparts, they have relationships, they live together, they bring their boyfriend, girlfriends around to the house, they have dinner together. It's a different dynamic altogether. we don't have that, and then all we're going off is, as an Indian Muslim man, Indian origin Muslim man, I was just told, make sure she prays, make sure she can cook, make sure she's that's it. But but my actual what's right for me is totally different. I needed something different to that. And then I was in this person, and this person, other person, can be hurt as well, but we just clashed. And you'll find that a lot of people clash.
Yeah.
And that's just but the reason they're clashing is not because one's abusive or the other party is abusive.
Yeah.
It's just because it's just the wrong relationship.
Incompatible, yeah.
Incompatible. And because our society, historically, we're very anti-divorce. Like as soon as divorce gets mentioned, you'll get all families getting together, pressuring you, forcing you, even that this isn't the right thing for me. I've got to be out of here.
Yeah.
But you're forced into it, and you're forced to stay. Then all that's doing is just adding to the acrimony and the toxicity there. Sometimes we just got to say, maybe the good guy, good girl, together they're just wrong.
But that's a very mature and a very emotionally intelligent way of looking at it.
Most people will stay in the situation.
Right, exactly. And this is kind of why we're having this conversation, because it's the psychological impact of that kind of thing on a child, where I hate the word toxic, but it's an unhealthy relationship. Mum and dad display they don't really like each other. Believe it or not, from a very young age, as a baby, the child will pick up on that. So sometimes you have to be, have the kind of intelligence to say, this is doing more harm than good, and separate. But unfortunately, what seems to be happening in these specific cases is that, because what you've got to understand as well, from a woman's perspective, right, it's very, very difficult to leave a relationship, because for a woman it's different than it is for a man, of course. So I can understand, not empathize in any way, but I can understand how difficult it must be for a woman. But she has to be mature enough, and she has to recognize that just because it's difficult, and just because you probably are going to be heartbroken, and you're going to feel, like Amina said, that shame, and it's going to impact you a lot more, especially in the Asian community, where you may feel like, I'm never going to be able to get married again, I'm going to be alone, everybody's going to look down on me, and all that kind of thing. And so instead of dealing with it in the right way, it sounds as though what's happening is the women are just saying, you know what, you're not seeing your kids. When you read about, the development of a child's brain, and if you recognize and understood how much this would impact your child, obviously we know that mums love their children. So why would you want to do that to your child? And I think maybe there's not enough education and understanding of how much this can damage your children.
Is that the case though? Or is it the case that for the men in the situation, they have pushed forward the idea of divorce because they recognize that the situation is not working, or the woman's asked for a divorce, and then the situation has what has been the...
So here's an interesting, I'm really glad you've asked this question, or we've raised this, because now there's a statistic I've seen recently, and that says that 80% of women actually initiate divorce, which is quite interesting. And from what we see, a lot of the times we've got brothers that are like, the woman's instigated the divorce. Very rarely do you see, I think maybe 3 in 10 would be the men instigating the divorce. 7 would be the woman's instigated divorce, and that's through like the Sharia courts, and then through the civil process and all that sort of stuff. And I just feel that, from a man's perspective, we said a difficulty about leaving a relationship. A man will find it a lot harder to leave a relationship, especially when he has a child there. I know there's all these kind of deadbeat father kind of things that get slung about, but in reality, from a man's perspective, men will do whatever they can. Men go work all hours and stuff like that to provide for their families and stuff, and when it comes down to these things, and as well as we spoke about earlier, when men try to leave, the whole families won't let them. That pressure's there. you know, I've only think, you know, I've only heard about maybe 2 stories where men were just like, I had enough. I just got my bags and left.
So what?
That's
Okay,
it.
so because from my own experience in hearing these cases, and these are Muslim and non-Muslim cases, normally what I hear and what I see in my community is the men leaving the marriages, the men initiating the divorce and leaving, and then what kind of can start to happen is the woman isn't what the woman necessarily wanted. So what you're saying is it's the other way around. So obviously there's cases of different cases where the men or the women. So what is it then that you're seeing, and the reason that the woman's giving, or you're not getting the reason that the woman's giving to then say, you know what, you're not seeing the kids?
Right. So what I'd say here is this: the dynamics are different for every relationship is different. So we'll create the categories. One's financial. So under Islam, the man is the provider. So, and then when you part Islamically, the man gets to keep his assets. Now, unfortunately, some sisters, you know, what they do, they cherry pick between deen and dunya. So what they do here is, whilst they're married, they'll say it's your duty to provide. But the moment divorce comes, it's like, get the lawyers in. And I'm taking half and stuff. And that, you know, again, the Sharia is a system, because the man has to he still has, like, if his father were to pass away, he's got to look after his mother. If he's got sisters and they were to get divorced, that all falls on him under the Islamic system. But all that's been tossed out the window. The women that do this are supposed to go back to their parents or to their brothers and to their family as part of the system, but they're not doing that. And then they're just taking this thing. So financial. So even then, you know, by withholding access, people will be like, well, how does withholding access give them money? Well, the way the CMS works, the child maintenance service, the more nights the father doesn't have, the more money you get. So the more time the child spends with the mother, the father has to pay more maintenance.
I did not know that.
Yeah, and this is what I mean. This is what this system is not there for peace or reconciliation. It's there for war. And when you enter it, that's what you're doing. You're really entering a war. This is why we're trying to advocate that. Look, let's stay away from this. Let's find other avenues, create other avenues, whatever they are. Might take a bit of time to figure it out, but let's create them. Let's join together and create these things. So that's the. Sorry, go on.
Sorry, I was going to ask what other reasons are there then that we're seeing of these cases?
So we've got the finance. One, I think, is what you were kind of alluding to when we were speaking about, you know, from what you're seeing, is rejection. If you're being rejected, then you're going to act out on that, which, okay, is one of those things. Another one is control, you know, because unfortunately there are people out there that want to dictate that this is how it happens. It's on my times, on my terms, and this is how it's going to be. You can only see them for 25 minutes a week and stuff like that. And these are honestly, these are the things. And even not only do we see this, in fact, we see even more after the separation. So even after the brother's gone to court, he's fought to see his kids, he's got a court order, but then the women are still dictating, you've got to do this, you've got to do that, you have not done this, you've not done that. And you're like, how are you going to find peace, that middle ground, to show the children how to co-parent? That mummy and daddy have split, but they're cool and they can co-parent because we are what matters. If you're going to behave like this, that's not what you're not going to send that message. You're going to then again these poor children then get caught up in the turmoil, in the conflict. So you know there's that, and it's just really sad to see. It's avoidable. This is a thing. Everything here is avoidable. If it's just, listen, and I get it, sisters. You know, men are idiotic at times. You know, I'm not saying they're angels. I speak to them, and you can recognize men that have issues. You know, and I appreciate that. But going to this extreme to get back at them is not the answer. Truly not the answer.
I think because really, you know, like you said, we need to be kind of like looking at real solutions. And from what I'm hearing, from what you're saying, Ahmed, the organizations that are set up are not, what did you say? They're not fit for purpose to help with this conflict resolution. So we've got, you know, the conflict resolution and the impact that it has on the children. And before it has an impact on the children, we need to be having conflict resolution. So where do we go from here? What can we do in terms of, you know, finding solutions that are going to be conflict resolution based?
Well, one thing I do recommend, and like it's lovely to be here, speak to sisters about this, because I feel like sisters have a major part to play in our sister groups and what have you. Start putting forward that, look, make court the extreme, you know, the last solution. The first solution is Ardeen and doing things correctly. And I appreciate there are times when men are like, you know, on the scale of ridiculous, where they put trackers and all this sorts of stuff. I get that. I'm not denying that. But 90%, if not more, it's just everyday dads that just want to see their kids. They're just split. They've left the home and they just want to spend time with their kids and get on with their life, you know, and they want the other party to get on with their life and have their best life as well, you know. And that's the mindset we need to kind of get to, proper reconciliation of trying to deal with the issues and trying to cultivate this relationship. Because in my community, you know, in the subcontinent community, men tend to get married at age around 23, 24, just after they've graduated for uni and all that stuff, get their first job. Then it's like, right, time to get married. Realistically, I don't feel like the brothers don't have the life experience that's needed to navigate a marriage. And then the sisters, unfortunately, they're being fed by a certain narrative, you know, that, you know, and as we spoke about the kind of feminist ideologies creeping in. Just to be clear, like feminism, you know, in its base, if proper feminism back in the day was just to seek equality in the workplace and in society. But this thing that's grown now, what we have is, so if you can see my hand, is you've got a system that favors one side. If you've got a system that favors one side, then that means the other side is going to suffer. And feminism is supposed to promote that, and that's been lost. And you know, the way the world's going, look at the expense of living at the moment, the house, what it costs to get a house, a roof over your heads and stuff. These things are really expensive. Now, you know, if you're going to quote to a man that it's you know, it's on you to go get the money, then he's having to go work 12, 14 hours a day. You know, there needs to be recognition on all parts. Like, look, if you want these things, there's give and take. Unfortunately, we've seen the rise of Instagram. You know, men are supposed to get like 6-packs and packed out like that. And you could be driving a Bugatti, as our Tate, you know, brother Tate, who we say now. But you know, in his historically what he said, and people like that. So the expectation of men is like sky high.
I do feel like there's a lot of pressure from both sides though. I don't feel that it just is from the women to the men, but I definitely think the younger generation, the millennials as you call them, they have been geared and they have been, you know, conditioned in a way by social media. So their upbringing is kind of half the parents and half social media. So everything that they're seeing is very quick and fast paced and very perfect and so it's quite difficult, isn't it, for them when they go into a marriage and there's problems, there's issues, because we know when we go into marriage, we're tested in that marriage in one way or another. Now, if you've just seen this perfect image of a man and of a woman and of marriage and these short clips that make it look like marriage is, you know, just romance and love and flowers and cookies and creams, then, you know, it's going to be quite a test and quite a reality shock when you go into these marriages and you see this and you're like, oh, this isn't what I expected. So you're definitely right in that there has to be more education around young people getting married and even older people as well. Because like I said, parents are pushing, you know, people to get married as soon as they hit 23, 24. There's no kind of understanding in what you should be looking for, because like you said, prevention is better than cure, right? So instead of this kind of narrative of when you hit this age, you get married, and there's no preparation, there's no understanding of matching up with the person with the right personality, you know, the whole love language stuff, the whole understanding the Quran and Sunnah and the rights of the husband and wife and all these kind of things. These could be more of a prevention before you even go into that situation. And maybe if we can prevent that, you know, going forward, instead of it being like, oh, now it's like you're stuck and now it's got to see, you know, the kids come along and now the problem's going to begin.
What Ahmed said a bit earlier about that lack of experience, that lack of life experience and understanding of the system is key as well. You know, like when you go into marriage, when, you know, young people and older people as well, because some of us from this generation, from our generation, are still, you know, we're inexperienced in understanding, you know, some of the nuances within the marriage that we have to pay attention to, because we don't look at those things. We're so busy looking at, like you said, the finances and the paying the bills and the just, you know, the motor part, the motor part of the relationship, instead of the actual dynamics and what that's supposed to look like. And I think the experience is lacking on both sides, for men and women. Yeah, you've got these things that are kind of influencing, you know, both sides. You've got the social media, you've got the feminism, you've got the red pill movement, you've got all these things that are influencing, you know, the way people think. But the lack of experience in actually, like you, I mean, I was watching a talk the other day, and they said that marriage is conflict resolution. Marriage is conflict resolution. That's what it's supposed to be. You're supposed to learn how to argue, in effect, because if we think about the word argue, it's just two people putting their both sides of an argument, not without the shouting. There shouldn't be shouting, there shouldn't be aggression, there shouldn't be all this, the emotion that's involved. It should just be two people being able to put their sides of the story and the other person hearing it. This communication. But not only that, there's also the lack of understanding about this system, because, you know, like Ahmed said, very rightly so, it's like that, because the women, when they do run towards the system for help, I know, because I'm in the system, so I'm able to use it. But I noticed from a long time ago that, you know what, this system isn't built to aid families. Because in order for you to get housing from the local authority, you have to be a single mother with children, single being the you know, the criteria that gets you the application, a successful application. So if that's the case, where's the man in this situation? How do they support families the same way? No, because when it comes to allocating housing, the single mothers get priority. People who are couples, they're lower down on the list. Why is that? They're not pushing.
Sister, can I just come in there, because you've raised something really good there. If you do enter into this realm, to get legal aid, you have to claim domestic abuse. So straight away they're putting that narrative there that, look, if you want to get this pot of money, you're going to have to make these allegations. And so in 2013, that's when the system changed for legal aid. And since then, the family courts, like all these domestic abuse cases and stuff, have gone through the roof. So you can look at the graph, you can see the change, and then you just see this upward trajectory of these types of cases all going into court. And then from there as well, if you do claim domestic abuse, then you actually get fast tracked on the housing.
Wow.
So, you know, this is it.
And
this
you
is
also
the system essentially wants you to do that.
You also, if you like you said, if you're coming in from another sort of country, you also can get indefinite leave to remain as well.
Yeah, absolutely, yeah.
Gone through domestic abuse, so there definitely is, like, you know, like there's kind of like underlying unspoken favour in terms of the woman, when with the courts, with the councils, with all of the kind of legal sort of systems that are put in place. They are put in place really to support women, single women, women with kids.
But I think the key thing to point out is that it's actually it points towards the destruction of our ummah, because it points towards the increase of the breakdown of the family. You know, where is the conflict resolution, rather than pushing the single mother narrative and pushing her towards, all right, fill out this application, but are you fitting into that criteria? You know, because then obviously women in that situation, especially younger women who are inexperienced, who need what they see as help because they're not getting it from maybe family, or they're getting support now from the system, they're going to run towards that. And they do run towards that because we've seen it and the statistics are there. So essentially what we're seeing is that breakdown of the family institution in our Islamic community. And we have to recognize that that's what that is. As much as, okay, there's things in the system that can support us. Essentially, if you're going down the narrative of, you know, making an allegation of a false allegation of domestic abuse, or a false allegation of any kind of abuse against a father, you're perpetuating this breakdown of the family. And it comes back to that, you know, the impact that it's going to have on your children, which is the most severe thing.
It's also having sorry, I'm just going there. But it's also having a societal impact that's affecting women. By that, what do I mean now is men are more resistant now to getting married. So, you know, and you're seeing the space now being filled up with like the red pill movements. And, you know, there's even within our community, there's a certain kind of Islamic red pill that's been put out there.
Islamic red pill. I've never heard it.
Well, I don't. Well, I call it that, but I don't know. I'll give it somebody who can term it better than me. But the thing is, men are getting scared to get married now. You know, and you know, we talk about that fear is now stopping us from fulfilling a sunnah. That then in turn is going to stop our society from growing. Before, historically, Muslims had the highest birth rates. But if this carries on in the next 10, 15 years, I think that's going to change. There's lots of it to unpack. There's lots of different directions from it. But this is really having an effect on our ummah. And if we don't take stock and start making changes, you know, we're going to really struggle with this. But yeah.
Definitely. I was going to say, I mean, you know, in terms of the support being there for women, you know, it is necessary. Let's be honest, because as we've spoken about, you know, this isn't the what about us, but at the same time, we have to recognize and acknowledge in this conversation that there are, you know, genuine cases of women that are being abused that then do go to, you know, and do need the system support. And I think when feminism came about years ago, it was kind of about that, you know, it was about the women that were being abused and needed to get away, and the system then came in to support us. So again, we're not referring to those cases, but there are people, unfortunately, that we're seeing that are abusing this and using the system to their advantage. Actually, what I kind of feel like when it comes to the women that are doing this is you're shooting yourself in the foot. Because in reality, you know, this feminism movement is, again, it is really designed for the breakdown of families. And what does that mean for a female? It means that you end up being single, that, you know, the system then, you know, will support you to a certain extent, but now you have to work, you know, so you're working, you're having to pay the bills. We've got the cost of living crisis. You're single, you're stressed out. You know, a man is needed in the family setup. The system is not a man. It's not a replacement for a man, you know. So the fact that you think that it's actually supporting you, you know, if you're in a serious situation that you know you need help from, alhamdulillah, of course, cool. But if you're not, you're cutting off your nose to spite your face, because ultimately you're going to be left in a bigger challenge, in a bigger situation where you're by yourself, raising your kids, struggling to live, struggling to work. And, you know, for a woman, you know, for a Muslim woman, our disposition, you know, our fitrah is that we need to be looked after. We need to be nurtured. We need to be provided for. You know, Allah the Quran, the men are the protectors and the maintainers of the women, and we're the bent rib. So we can only manage and handle so much as women. So we have to kind of look at it like, you know, for women that are listening, realistically, you know, and ultimately, don't feed into this narrative if you are, because it really long term is going to do more harm than good, and it is damaging for you.
And it's damaging. And again, like coming back to the raising of the kids, you know, in that single mother situation, you raising your kids by yourself, you can't teach your sons to be men. And you can't be that first love for your daughters as the man that the father is supposed to be. You can't be both father and mother in that situation. And when your children are acting out, you're going to now be overcompensating, and or you're going to be stressed because you can't manage their behavior, or you're going to be asking other people to look after your children instead. So now other people are raising your kids instead of you and their father. What, where's the balance? We have to really be able to manage the emotions, because that's what it comes back to. Are you going to make a choice based on your emotions at the time, instead of really thinking about the logical long-term effects of the decision that you're potentially about to make?
Both you sisters have summed it up beautifully there, and it's exactly that. My plea to the sisters watching this, if you know of, or if you are doing this, if you are withholding access, please reconsider. And if you are going through a situation, please try and avoid the courts. Try and find, if you're struggling with the brother, contact us. We'll speak to him. We'll try and work something out. It's got to be a better way. There is a better way. Inshallah, together we can find it. But let's not feed the court system, and let's create a system of our own that puts us in a better place for the hereafter.
Sure. Amen. And I think that's a really good place to end on, because this again isn't a conversation to sit down and sort of bash and blame women or men. It's a conversation to kind of raise awareness and also just to talk about the problem, and then what is the solution. And as Muslims, we really want to, as Muslims, just work together. I don't have any children myself. However, it affects me, it affects me as a Muslim woman, seeing my Muslim brothers, suffering. It's not nice to see these things happening, and to support, men and women that are in these kind of situations as well. And again, going back to the children, subhanAllah, the psychological impact that it does have. And we could probably have another podcast and talk about that side of things as well, inshallah.
Yeah,
inshallah. Definitely, always here.
Well, we'll wrap up then, guys. Ahmed, jazakallahu khairan for joining us. It's been a pleasure actually to hear a brother's side that has actually worked with men, and to be, like you said, that there is that unconscious bias where sometimes as a woman you do kind of lean towards the side of the woman, and asking the sisters that are watching just to have an open mind and to just hear the brother and these real life situations that are happening. So thank you.
Jazakallah for having me. Really appreciate it.
Thank you for tuning in to another episode of Sister to Sister. And do not forget to like, comment and subscribe. And we'll see you here next time. Just remember to be kind, as you never know what battle someone is facing.